evening, everybody. My name is Adam Bria. I'm the chair of the Housing Committee. I'm going to call this meeting to order at 6:33 p.m. on Monday, December 22nd. Khalid, if you could, please take the roll.
Yes. Okay, members. There were 14 members on this committee. 8 are needed for quorum. Adam Brihak.
Present.
Marie Charles. David Giordano. James Gray.
Present.
John Green. Christina Johnson.
Present.
James Kemp.
Present.
James. Wilfredo Lopez. Jessica Morris. Here. Beverly Rabone.
Present.
Don Sanders. Loretta So.
Here.
Hugh Candy Vasquez.
Here.
Jason Wu.
All right, thank you, everyone. I'm going to go over some ground rules before we begin. No one may speak until granted the floor. CB 11 members, if you have a question about board business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand and wait to be recognized. To raise your hand through Zoom, click the participants icon and then you will find the raise hand function there. Members should not engage in a back and forth discussion. The chair will recognize the next person to speak. Please keep your questions and comments brief and on topic to the discussion. Members of the public, if you have a question or comment about the subjects on the agenda, please raise your hand and wait to be recognized. Okay. So now we will move, we already called the meeting order, did the roll call. We'll go to the adoption of the agenda. I don't see any objections. Go ahead.
In regards to the minutes, the second paragraph, it says all.
We're not at the minutes yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we'll get there right now. So do I see any objections to adopting the agenda? Okay, seeing none, then and now minutes. Okay, Beverly, go ahead. Probably minutes. On the minutes.
In regards to the second paragraph, I want to know if we can add mental health as a reason, specifically for single parents with children who are homeless or at risk of homelessness and mental health.
I'll add it in as we speak.
Just letting you know, Marie Charles just joined us online.
Gotcha. I'm just gonna write in serious mental health issues. I think that's the way they, but if I find the, I think that's a term, if I find the right one, so. All right, so I already made that, change. So with that amendment to the minutes, this is the November minutes. If I don't see any objections, then we will adopt the minutes. Okay, seeing no objections, then the November minutes have been adopted with the amendments add serious mental illness to the second paragraph of old business part of it. All right. So now we'll move into announcements and informational updates. I mean, these are announcements, but we can kind of have the brief discussions on them. Jessica, is that here?
Yeah, I have a brief announcement. They're glad to be so quick. So Tuesday, January 27th is the annual Hope Count. If you don't know what the Hope Count is, it's Hope Homeless Outreach Population Estimate Survey. Happens every year. If any board members have interest in volunteering or folks who you know who might like to volunteer, that's still available. It happens from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. So you have to give up your sleep. But it's really the way that DSS, HRA, and DHS know how many people are out there who don't have a place to go. So I don't know if you can specify if you want to be local to your neighborhood, but I imagine that's probably part of the signing up. So I will forward this information to the committee and also include our Human Services Committee. And please, once you receive it, feel welcome to share with anybody who might know who may have interest in supporting the effort this year or any other year.
Okay, thank you, Andy.
What date is that?
Tuesday, January 27th.
Oh, the 27th.
It might be our full board date.
Yes, because we had to move it because of the videographer.
Yeah, so it's right after full board. Maybe there's like a whole party afterwards. So people go do the whole count.
Yeah, you were,
Yeah, he's looking at me.
just as a heads up, that you were all, I believe, sent this email a couple weeks ago by Angel.
Yeah,
In
he
January
mentioned
and February, full board meetings were moved to the fourth week because our videographer was not available the third week. And then we had to consider that option, making it all in person, which I was afraid could threaten quorum, which I don't want to have happen in our first couple of meetings. And then the owl apparently does not work well in big groups. So that's why those meetings were moved. Just-
I thought it was because of the holidays.
No, the videographer, I guess, you know. We didn't, there was no perfect solution, so moving it made the most sense. All right, so again, these are announcements, but they are things we've been working on, or I think we will be working on. So we'll start with the safety plan at Jackie Robinson Houses. And Loretta, feel free to chime in if, you know, I'm missing anything. But, you know, we've had presentations by Ascendant, and then Via Development is the property management company. They've come here and they've talked about the, you know, transition of Jackie Robinson and the scattered sites. But, you know, we're primarily talking about Jackie Robinson right now with this. That they're transitioning to the PAC program. They already have, Loretta said, what was it, on the 18th or the 19th? Yeah, on the 18th. I believe residents have been getting, I don't know what the proper term is, but I guess transition packets left at their door, so I guess they can understand, you know, what exactly it entails. Although I do feel like I went to a tenant meeting that there has been already, you know, outreach and this and that, so people aren't, you know, I can't speak for everybody there, but it seemed like tenants that were there were aware of, you know, what was going on. Beverly was there with me and Marie, and then the day, so just to get into this, so the day before we had gone to do a walkthrough with Loretta and the tenant association leadership. We did a walkthrough. Mostly we just sat and talked, which I also found helpful to just sit, because if you know, they're going into a PAC program, so it wasn't, obviously a lot of things are going to get renovated, the whole thing, so it's supposed to. So it seemed more pressing to just kind of sit there and understand, you know, how they felt this process was going and what they wanted to see. And, you know, so we touched on a lot of topics, but one of them that came up was security. And then when we went to the meeting the following night, it was like a Thanksgiving. Night Shift had a representative there, and Via Development and some of the other partners involved. And a couple of concerns came up were about the safety plan. I felt, and just correct me if I'm wrong, that some people were under the impression that there would be on-site security as kind of like a permanent thing, you know, permanent fixture. If you all remember White Houses, which was also being done by Ascendant on, I think, what is it, 103rd, 104th, and 2nd for the elderly. They weren't originally going to put on-site security there either, but we urged them to, and I believe they are. So one incident that jumped out to me that evening was there was a resident there that was at the meeting, and he kind of volunteered that people come in to the property and kind of loiter all night in the hallway, possibly using controlled substances, that they call his name, but he doesn't really know them. But I believe he uses the services provided at On Point, and that, you know, maybe they moved him from there. But it was just very interesting. You know, he kind of just volunteered this. Nobody really was asking him or anything. And then a person that lives on, I guess, his floor with a child said that they thought that he does let the people in, that he does know them, and that their child, they can't let their child even go to the elevator on their own because this is happening, right? I mean, am I wrong? We heard this, right? Yeah, that's what we true. Yeah, we heard, right. So, you know, this sounded, and then we were hearing that, like, when residents go to police officers that are, you know, just around the property, and, you know, as like, instead of like calling 911, they're like, oh, there's a cop, I'll just go ask them. And then the cops will be like, no, you need to, you know, call 911. And, you know, and then a lot of these things kind of, you know, they happen quickly, right? And then what the, you know, what the police will tell you is, oh, well, then the threat's not there anymore. But it could be like a repeat offender, you know, God bless you. And it's like, you just want them to get caught at some point because, you know, they'll just leave, but they keep coming back and kind of doing the same thing. So just, and then look, I mean, you know, I know this is, so I've been in back and forth. I think I've shared the emails with all of you with Via Development, trying to understand, because they're saying that they'll have on-site security to some extent during this phase of the transition. But that once, you know, the transition's fully over and it's done, that then there will not be on-site security. They say that due to the home, I sent all emails to you, due to like the uniqueness of Jackie Robinson houses, and I'm like, well, you know, what properties have you managed similar? And I just said, look, I said, you know, because Ascendant is the common thread, right? Via Development isn't working on white houses. They had, I think it was community builders or something. And I just tried to say to them, well, they thought the same thing there, and then they changed their minds. And I said, and if you're familiar, you know, with East Harlem, I mean, and this is just my opinion, I think where Jackie Robinson is definitely needs security more than 104th and 2nd. So just to sum it up, I literally got an email from Via Development today. And they just, you know, don't seem to, you know, it's definitely a money thing. They finally kind of said it. I wanted them to just say it, but they said, you know, they have a budget for security. You know, they made like a lot of, oh, it's not effective. The security won't be, you know, is it going to be trained? But I'm like, well, just, you know, you can hire, you know, good security. I was like, could you even consider, it doesn't have to be 24/7, but you could have somebody on a night shift. And here's my reason, like the key fob, this, that, if that tenant's story was true, and I have no reason to believe it wasn't about her neighbor, then all these gates and key fob and this doesn't stop that because, you know, you could have internal issues with people letting people in. So, you know, they're not really budging. I kind of told Chris to chime in because I'm not really getting anywhere with this person. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I found one of them kind of rude. I forgot who it was, but when tenants were asking questions that night, one of their people, she was kind of, yeah, you remember what, so she was very dismissive and you didn't feel really welcome to ask another question. So that's kind of why, I'm really like not letting this go. First, and I'm not going to. I feel like. So, Jessica, I saw you in here.
Yeah. So speaking generally, because I don't know the specifics, often it's, security is something that has to be continually re-evaluated through a process. And that commitment to periodically continue to work with residents and to not already have set in stone what the answer is, you know, that's really important to us know that this is going to evolve over the course of years, and the right answer today and next week isn't the same solution as 3 months from now, regardless of whatever the specifics are. So, you know, making progress towards getting a commitment to continually reevaluate periodically, whether it's on a 3-month basis or a 6-month basis, for the duration of the project and over the course of the first 3 years of completion, that would be a good, you know, maybe that's something that Ascendant can help with, because my sense is that they have been kind of responsive in recognizing that things change all the time, and you have to be responsive in order to make sure that that things have better outcomes than if you are too rigid in the process. So I think advocating for a periodic kind of review of these questions to say, you know, what are the thresholds? What is the criteria that would need to be met in order to say, hey, that's not working and it needs to change. And at that point, then you have recourse to action periodically to make adjustments.
Andy?
So, in the past, as far as I remember, Jackie Robinson had security. Because most of it is all majority seniors. And they used to have people in there, and was that privately done, or, because I used to see, when I've been there before, there was always someone that's sign in and let them know where he was going, and then, what I'm talking about, like, 32,000.
Well, that's probably what's, in terms of residents. They had a resident watch, but those were residents.
Oh, okay.
No one dressed in a uniform, because when I
I
was
mean, the
there, there was
police
somebody
would,
dressed.
the police would come through, you know, and they checks and whatnot, and then speak with the resident that was on patrol, on resident watch. But we never really had security, like, say, 24/7. Or maybe not that much, no. It was, we had the police, they would come and walk through the buildings. Yeah. And, then they put cameras up, and that's what CNC was telling the security, they said they're gonna put cameras up. But we already have cameras up.
Well, the cameras are only as good as who's watching them,
Yeah.
right? And from what I understand, you know, and we can all go back, that's why I'm getting everything in emails. I'll share the latest email I got today. You know, I was like, all right, well, if you're gonna have cameras, is somebody gonna be monitoring these cameras at all times? And they're like, well, no, but, you know, the management team will have it on their phone. And I'm like, yeah, but like, you know, because, oh, we have motion sensors, but I'm like, yeah, but motion sensor could alert you to nothing. Like, you're gonna, you know, there's gonna be a point where you're gonna stop, you know, looking at, they said there's a way to like, no, I guess if someone's loitering, like they can tell if the person's been stinking. I'll share it, it was in this new email. It's just my concern even with that again is, you know, if you're not watching 24/7 and then you go back and you look over the feed the next day, and really you're only gonna go look at a certain time, I would think, because you found out there was an incident, then it's kind of, it's very like retroactive, like you're not doing it in the time needed. And I agree with Jessica, and I feel like they have been saying, you know, that it's an adaptable plan, and, you know, it's fluid depending on situation. I just say my concern is like, what does that, what triggers that adaptability? Like, is it gonna be an incident that's like, oh, okay, now we need security, but then it was an incident that could have been prevented? And I guess I'll just, this will be the last thing I say on this. I don't love hearing about their budget, and I'll tell you why. I don't know who would go to that property in that area, you know, of our community, and it's not the safest area. Okay, you do have, I know because you walk the train, let's just be honest, like, and you have the on point, you go to 126, it has more security challenges, there's more loitering, there's more, you know, there are just areas that wouldn't need as much security. And so they should have known all this. And when they put their bid in or whatever it was, they should have evaluated what security would be needed and know if they could do it or not. The fact that they think that, you know, they can't even get one security guard, and they go, like, I'm not saying that this security guard is going to, you know, drop kick someone outside, but just someone who's actively there to call the cops or deter people, right? A lot, what we heard that day didn't sound like it was people were going to be violent or whatever, but it was something that if a security guard was there, could have either deterred them, got them to leave, or called the cops. You can't make tenants solely responsible for calling cops in common areas. That should not, it should not be something you should be expected to do where you live, at least in my opinion. Like, you can do it, you should do it, but the expectation that you have to like kind of self-report and this and that, I mean, that's not always, you know, people fear retribution. There are a million reasons why people don't want to do that. And so I think that that's another concern. Beverly, did you have anything?
Yeah, in regards to the security, Loretta, you said something about the police used to come and patrol the building. Is that something that can still happen while they're making this transition, or when they do that?
Well,
Is
right
that
now they
something,
don't do that.
the police, they don't do that no
They
more?
did away with that. I wish they were still
okay.
doing it.
Oh, okay,
They don't do verticals anymore.
right, that's what it was called, I remember that. Oh, okay, so when they do the construction, they're gonna take everybody out of one side of the building, correct?
As far as I know,
I think they're doing the one.
And then they're gonna do the other. are they gonna have security on that
That's the
building?
question that we have.
Right, because if they're gonna have that building empty, plus their supplies and stuff like that, that would warrant them to have somebody there.
Yeah.
And it can
I think
double as
during-
somebody else.
I think during the transition, there will be, I still don't think they've been 100% clear, but there will be some, I think they said a tour commander or, something, there will be an on-site security present. Again, I have to find out exactly how much that will be, but it's definitely, there will be some during this phase that it's currently in. But that once that everybody's moved back in and everything is done, and whatever even that presence is would go off. At least unless things get reevaluated or they change it, right? So, but as of right now, I think that is the plan.
When they talked about the cameras, is the cameras on the key fob themselves, like when somebody, like, what do you call those butlers at the door? and
Oh,
somebody-
you mean like a digital?
Yeah, digital, where they record people coming in and what guns and stuff like that. Is that the type of system that they're planning
I mean,
to?
I can pull, in the meantime, Jessica, you got, let me see if I could see what they wrote about that.
So, Then something you said about whether a security plan was proposed or was, whether it's a kind of form of negligence that it wasn't, in the bid process. I think that is something that, if you're able to do some comparative analysis, right, that there is a project similar in an area with lower or comparable crime rates, and there's a security plan, then you can point to that and say that there's not kind of equal treatment going on,
Right.
and that would be kind of recourse to action to be able to continue to demand what's needed. And I know that might take a little bit of work, but I think if you set it up as apples to apples, in that something is ongoing elsewhere and it includes this as a part of what's being provided, and that puts a lot of responsibility on whoever might be able to do that. And I'm not sure I know in the past we have engaged an entity at the city level about comparative services, whether what we were getting here was equal and comparable to what other communities were getting elsewhere. And so it may not be our responsibility to do that work, but it may be something that can be brought to a body that ensures that, when there are public dollars being allocated, that they're being allocated fairly, especially if it seems like it's an oversight in a way that may result in harm or unsafe situations for people later.
Thank you. To the question about security cameras, and then we'll move on to the next topic. I appreciate the feedback. I'm starting to think that we may have to figure something like that out because, I'll be honest, they do respond. They are responsive. I'm not going to say that, but you just keep responding and telling someone no. Sometimes you can accept no from answer. I don't know if this is where we should just say, okay, maybe we have to look into alternative methods to see, what's going on or, what the equity of this would be. With the cameras, so they wrote to me today. The security team has access to nearly 100 cameras that will be on site at all times. Feeds are reviewed periodically. All right, so that was what I was saying. There are a few cameras of high importance or traffic, such as lobbies and common areas that are monitored more continuously. In real time, cameras are equipped with capabilities that alert them to specific actions for immediate attention, such as motion sensors with timers that alert the team to loitering in stairwells. The team will be monitoring activities closely through a variety of methods. No matter the methods we employ, tips from residents help our team to keep the property safe, especially incidents that cannot be seen with cameras. If there is a dangerous situation or altercation, all staff, including security staff, are trained and residents are urged to call 911. Now they're saying security staff.
Security's gonna be in
Right,
front of us.
so I didn't, I didn't have a chance to really, I read this in, on the train over here, so when when I have more time, I know, as I'm reading this now, I'm like, what? But it's probably a mistake of some sort, but, okay, that just gives you an idea, but what you've heard already is that they'll be reviewed periodically. The, ones in the higher traffic areas will be reviewed more. Again, though, right? If somebody isn't reviewing them 24/7, are they really keeping someone up at like 3 a.m. to do the night shift? Are they gonna have their alerts on? You know, there comes a point where if your phone keeps getting alerts and you don't, think it's something, you're just gonna, you're gonna stop checking every time, right? So, look, it's an ongoing thing, and it will continue to be. And I will say, you're all here. I always say, to the best of my recollection, when the Senate came for White Houses, we had asked them that they engage the tenants in the security plan, and they didn't really seem like they had. They kind of said it, and then that's when they went back, because on our walkthrough there, we were also alerted of many security issues. One amongst them was like empty units being taken over to sell drugs and keep drugs there and stuff. And it was like, when we bought that up and stuff, they're like, oh, okay, we'll have some on-site security, right? So we'll leave it at that. I will share this email with everybody. I already reading things in there that would merit another reply from me. They might just get sick of me and do it, but they don't want to hear about it anymore, which would be great. So we'll move to B, St. Francis Friends of the Poor proposed development at 2162 3rd Avenue. I'll keep this brief, but there is a minor update. So they did close on the property. I believe they now own it. And so they reached out, I believe, to me, to Isaac, and yes, whoever else was on the email. I think we had Xavier, Angel, and I think Jessica Elliott, and then sometimes you always replies people drop them, I don't know, and then members of their team. So they said that now that they've closed, they'd be happy to kind of meet in the new year, which was a little bit better, because I started to feel like it was going to the spring, and I'm kind of now feeling like we could get something on the books in January. There was, when I'd spoken to Human Services and Youth, and the reason youth got involved, if we all remember, was like one of our things was kind of like to raise their awareness of the crisis of homeless children in New York City, and ask that why can't I think one of our budget requests too was about supportive housing that could expand on the demographics that it covers. So the idea was that maybe we have an internal meeting, not meaning that all 3 committees have to meet, but that the committee chairs and their vice chairs could meet, and then anyone else who is interested. I think I don't know really always how it's been done, but I think moving forward, if there are these meetings, that there is a link provided so that committee members, sometimes these are on the weekday in the daytime where anyone could join in. Because it'd just be otherwise hard for 3 committees to kind of coordinate a conversation about this. So I'm still thinking that we'll probably have some type of internal conversation before. So we're all kind of like aware of, what it is we're looking for and what it is we're talking about before we sit down with them, right? Because what could have happened, I think, is they could just go to another committee, go here, and then all of a sudden, somebody here has a different opinion, someone there, it's like kind of like divide and conquer. I'm not saying that's what they were doing, just saying I think it's best that we figure it out, we debate, we have our own, and then we leave hopefully with something that everybody can kind of get around, and then we meet with them. I also reached out to them about scheduling a walkthrough of one of their other facilities. They said, I like to push for these things on the weekends, but before I even could, they suggested more of a weekday during the daytime, because I guess that's when they're offering the most services to their residents and stuff, so we could kind of see things, in full swing, which I think will be useful. I think it would just be good to see it with our own eyes, right? Like we all have our preconceived notions or things that we've seen or things that we're hearing, and so I think it would be good. I'm always a little weary of announced walkthroughs because you you know, but.
Everybody looks tight.
Oh, you can do an announce walk, and then you can just show up another time, right?
Everybody looks good.
Yeah, exactly, but it's a start, and at least, you know, when we show up and we do this too, I think, you know, it shows them like, oh, well, you know, they are serious, right? They're gonna come to us too, right? So, that's all gonna, I mean, this is all gonna be starting to be done where I'm not leadership of this committee anymore, but I'm gonna stay fully engaged, obviously, you know, allow the leadership of this committee to do their own thing, but, you know, trust that they will, you know, continue to see the things that we're in the middle of, and, you know, and then do better things than I was doing. But, so, that's it with that. It's gonna touch into C, so something just in general about the supportive housing. At the land use meeting, I think HPD was present, and correct me if I'm wrong, Elsa, but Angel had kind of said to HPD, can you give us an assessment on the, you know, amount, the distribution of supportive housing in the city, right? Because he says, you know, we keep being told that we're saturated, and you know what, prove us wrong, you know, if it's not true, right? Show us the numbers. And so I don't believe that we've still gotten those numbers. And the longer we don't get them when we ask for them is only going to make people feel like the problem is maybe even worse for you. So I think it's in their best interest to address it. But just so you're all aware, that is something that's being requested, and I believe there will be follow-up on that. Jessica?
Yeah, thank you, very much. I appreciate that the conversation is happening across committees and relative to many different ongoing developments. With regard to St. Francis Friends of the Poor, I just want to put it out there that the capacity for ground floor activation with the art programming that is at the heart of that specific CBO's method of doing what they do well and differentiating what they do, I think is something that from a kind of therapeutic and kind of potential opportunity would be really great to sort of recognize and amplify. And I say that in kind of putting out there, what is it that we're asking for, right? When you want something different than what was proposed. And I would suggest that is a real big opportunity for all ages of people who have experienced any challenge in life. And it is there's a big wrapper and a big ground floor there. So I sent an email to housing earlier today. You probably didn't read it yet.
No.
Okay. So in 2008, the Furman Center, NYU's Furman Center, in 2008 was a long time ago, but they tried, and they published a paper on the effects of supportive housing on surrounding neighborhoods. And in doing that, they also managed to get all of this data on where there were units, and how many and of what kind. And it was a data set that was compiled through their partnerships. DDC has a program, Town and Gown, that is able to fund research projects within existing budgets to better understand some opportunities throughout ongoing efforts. So that NYU had those relationships, the Furman Center had those relationships and published a report. If we were to ask them tomorrow to pick that up with some willing partnerships and students and funding that they have sitting somewhere and saying, we really want to understand this better because it's here, and we've been saddled with the negative sides, and how do we better understand what the opportunities are in partnership with Hunter. They can build those consortiums, But by the time, 3 years from now rolls around, that's 15 years from the last time we did a study. So it may be time to bring that up again, in which case they can give us the answer and they can advocate for it as long as the community voice is a proud partner in helping to sort of drive that work and understand what is the question, what are we trying to better understand, once you have the data, and how does that then, inform some actions in process here. So that's as it relates to supportive housing and how difficult it is to to get data, and they were able to do it. And so I think if they've done it once, someone's still there who can do it again. So we just kind of have to ask. And Town and Gown is a great vehicle for city agency partners, DOHMH and DSS and all of these other agency partners to find the right people who really want to do good at all these different agencies and plug them into the academic partner who's plugged into the community, who's plugged into the development team, who can say, what do you want to know? And why?
I think that's a great idea. I'll reach out myself. Thank you. I wish HPD would, but there sounds like there's value beyond just getting the statistics. I think it's a great idea.
We'll see, maybe with the new administration, things are gonna change anyway.
I mean,
Most probably, they're going to have to cooperate and work more jointly with the community, getting information, because housing is a big
that's what we've
commodity.
been told, so. That's what happens. So that's been the spirit of it, so, we won't really know, so, well, let's be optimistic. Beverly?
Don't we have within our own database, the type of buildings that was done in East Harlem thus far, and which one was supportive houses and how many units? Now, can we pull from that data also?
I don't know if I know what you're saying, and I could be wrong, but I remember hearing Angel say, and I'll double check whatever from misrepresenting, who said that I don't think every supportive housing development that's in this neighborhood has come to this board.
Right, but the ones that have come here.
Right, but we know those, but the question is how much more is there that we don't know about?
Right, that will be will we get that other information from them, from the Furman Center?
Yeah,
But to keep a record like
of what we've seen.
what
Yeah.
we said and what we know that we agreed to and we know that's here, and always keep that type of data or some type of rubric system where we have that data, how many units you think you're gonna put here, and keep account of them from this time forward, or even a short time period from the last 5 years within Community Board 11. What was it, well, that takes more for buildings to be built, and so the last 10 years, pull up the data that we have in our own community, where they had to come to us. And if they came to fruition, then, we can keep that, we have that numbers right there.
And Candy,
It's a great idea, and I started the spreadsheet, from the new projects, current projects that exist here, but it only goes back, and it doesn't cover everything, it covers the new, and something, that is one of the biggest challenges is that there are so many different kinds of subsidy, like so many different ways to get funding from so many different channels that, it's tough to figure out, do we want a unit count? Do we want kind of addresses of units, or what percentage of the building is, right? And I ran in, I hit a wall in looking at the data set that the Furman Center has published, which starts to be good in that it identifies every building that has a subsidy, meaning a tax break or some sort of programmatic dollars that allow it to be affordable. And at the same time, and this was another kind of point of alarm, is that those subsidies expire 421A expire. Some of them expire. Some of them are perpetuity, some of them expire. And it was shocking, as of 2024, there were 3,495 units in East Harlem eligible to expire from housing programs between 2025 and 2030. And 5,604 units eligible to expire from housing programs between 2031 and 2040. So George has mentioned this in a couple of years ago. He gave a presentation, George James, the land use consultant, talking about the churn of units, that some of these that expire, we get new units online, but that's kind of, you're always subtracting when you're adding because these subsidies expire. But those numbers are enormous, and I started to worry of like, is there something that we're not aware of that's going to happen? And 2030 is not far from now. It's 4 years, right? 2040 is 14 years, right? That's not far. At the same time, it seemed like so far in the future, we didn't have to worry about it in some of these processes that were coming down the pipeline 7, 10 years ago. So, and Kenya said, I think it may be an issue that the mayoral administration has particular interest in figuring out, what does that mean? I think that's where you run the risk of the market rate being the norm and the protections that have been in place start to really change the landscape when they expire. So I don't want to sow fear when I don't know as much as I should, but I do know that they're big numbers of kind of potential change embedded in the covenants that are part of affordability from the outset. So something that we should probably find a way to be more aware of the process. But I think it's embedded in your question of, can we use what we have already to know what could be done, coupled with someone who has a real deep understanding of how time plays into all of these things that may change.
So supportive housing, it depends what it is, what it's for, and what group you're targeting. Because when you really guys, to understand it about how the root of the supportive housing is, and I know that we need to have at least some type of, not training, but at least take an insight when an RFP comes out, like the NOFAs from the state, the city, and federal. Because they all ask for supportive housing, they'll give you funding for some of the residents targeting seniors. You'll get supportive housing for seniors, domestic violence. They give you a list of who to target that they're going to give supportive housing. That's why it's not a one size fit all. So when they start saying, well, we're gonna give some supportive housing, if they say 15-15, honestly, they're talking about people that have mental
abuse.
right. And that's the money.
HIV,
And they throwing that money at everybody that is doing housing only because they know if you have a gap, financial gap for that building to make it feasible, HPD is gonna dangle it and say, well, yeah, you know what, I'll give you that money, but you need to get this population.
Right.
And you don't want that because you already have your targeted population already. So if you're working with domestic violence, right, we're not gonna put it out there stating this building is gonna be for domestic violence, survivors of domestic violence, because you're putting everybody at risk. And next thing you know, someone's gonna know that
You're putting a target on them.
yeah, so then that's where you got supportive housing, because you're gonna give them also some type of
You blend it
services.
into.
Right, so it's not a one size fit all. When we're asking to find out through the land use, when they come in before us, and they say that there's gonna be some supportive housing, we really need to first investigate before we even say no. What is who are the targeted populations that is gonna be living there, and especially if it's gonna be multifamily, that is gonna be blended, because they're gonna need that funding if that's where that's coming from. And that's where you gotta provide additional services with social services. That's where you get the support from, you know, so that is a difference. But if we look at the whole RFPs, it'll explain to you what exactly they're actually looking for before they give you any of that funding. I mean, you understand what I'm saying?
All right,
That's
Beverly,
what
last
So
comment on this and we'll.
So wouldn't that be two issues that we're looking for? Because we're actually looking for the number of units that's used for supportive
And then
housing.
how much is used for each?
And
Yeah.
which categories, like you said, for domestic violence or people for drug use. So I think we're looking at two sets of data
Yes,
that needs to be addressed or for us to keep an eye on. This way, I understand we shouldn't lump everything all in one, but I think things that's unique to the building itself, how many units, how many of them going to supportive housing, how many of them is going for the AMI at that target,
The state.
Right.
You know,
and keep a track of that, and then the ones for what type, as a different type of set of data. This way we'll have both. This way we can say, well, we have like 5,000 domestic violence units already. We need this type of units.
they're gonna lump them, into homeless. That's how they're gonna lump them in. They're not gonna say domestic violence, they're going to say homeless.
right, but, yes, but when they do, they're identifying certain populations
Right,
within.
right.
And so this will segue into C, but I agree with you, Beverly. I think, this committee also, so we're not misinterpreted, I think more of us also saying, oh, we have too much is not necessarily what we've been saying as much as we don't have enough. We just keep getting the same type of support by serving. You know, when we talk about what we have, it is mostly just for single adult,
Right.
they're all studio units.
Right,
And
right.
that'll transition into letter C,
Mhm.
Volunteers of America proposed redevelopment
Yeah,
at 22
right.
East 119th Street. So in the spirit of, you know, collaborating with other communities, I am on land use, as is Beverly, Nelson's on there. I'm trying to think who else is
Me.
there. Candy. Were you, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So Volunteers of America already manages a property at 22 East 119th Street. I believe it's 174 SRO for
Mhm.
174 units for veterans, right?
And seniors.
And seniors. The main reason that this was put here is because in that meeting, there was issues raised with how that property is currently being managed. So
Mhm.
we were presented at pre-Euler, that this whole site is gonna be, essentially this property they're in, they're gonna build a new property for the veterans that are there now. They're gonna relocate them. They're gonna knock the existing building down. They're gonna build, I think, another, let's call it 150 supportive units, and then a bunch of affordable housing.
Right.
But before all of that, you know, because it would stay Volunteers of America. I believe right now, the land is owned, but the building's owned by the city. Volunteers of America, I think, last I checked, they get like a 5-year contract.
Right.
I think it was like 2.3 million, but I don't know if that's the current one. I think that one expired in 2023 or
Yeah.
something like that. So I'm assuming they probably renewed it. That maybe just isn't available online. I don't think in their presentation, it was too clear on what that business relationship is going to look like now. There's been the talk, you know, that part of the actions are going to be disposition of land, which can mean a whole number of things. And I know Beverly, you had sent me that email about
Right.
kind of understanding what exactly is the city giving? What is the city getting back when they're just giving these things to these organizations, right?
Right.
Obviously, one thing they're going to say is, well, you're getting the affordable housing and this and that, but I think that there was concern about the way this organization is managing that property. And so I think that I got the contact info from Angel in the last week or so. I just have been in a rush because nobody is going to want to go on a walkthrough in the holidays, but into the new year to tour that property. Because, you know, if they're having trouble managing what they have, are we confident in giving them then another 400, 500 units to manage? On top of that, they're gonna be adding additional units of supportive housing, and again, they, as far as I remember, will all be studio units. So I did ask them if they were, were dead set on, and I asked it because HPD was there as well, and as you said, Candy, right? I think a lot of the reasons that they do build studios, whatever, is because that's where the funding goes to, right? So, you can't really make too much headway just talking to these organizations, because it's ultimately the city and the state that are gonna have to change what they fund. So,
Right.
but I did make the request that, rather than do another 150, I understand the 174 are gonna transfer over, so the veterans, stay in place. But then these new units, why do they just have to also be studios? Like, why couldn't there be, people go, oh, there are less units, but I'm like, if you build 42 bedrooms as opposed to, 150 studios, one can argue you're actually housing more people in those two bedrooms. So that's all things to consider, but the main reason for putting this on the agenda is I think there will be a walkthrough in the near future of this property to see the current state of it. I've included Jason, land use chair, on that because this did go to that committee, and ultimately that committee is, ultimately we're all gonna make that decision, but that committee will be tasked with sending it to the full board down the road. It's not anytime soon as far as I know, but like, as Jessica said, things creep up faster than things. So hopefully it'll be a joint walkthrough. It will be a joint walkthrough in the sense that if some of us show up, we're already on both committees, but yeah, so just keep your, and then, sorry, one last thing, on the topic of walkthroughs, trying to set something up for Carver houses with Nina Saxon, who's the TA president there. So that hopefully is something that happens early on in the new year as well, all right? Jessica, Candy, and then Beverly, if you had your hand up too, and then those three comments, questions, and we'll move to the next one, all right?
I definitely wasn't first, but I'm first.
I just work this way as my, yeah.
So when Nielsen gave the report out at the board, it was well timed, and I think it's something that came up with Two Valley Terrace, and co-management of, like a campus, that there are, even though some may argue that that's concentration, whether if it's not wanted, that it can be seen as a problem. At the same time, there may be an opportunity from an urban design perspective. I don't know if the building that is going to be a part of the overall plan to move the existing residents to is adjacent to what will be developed or proximate, very nearby. And the sort of getting at unit size is one early opportunity to kind of change the composition of the development. At the same time, I would not underestimate the potential capacity for advocating for kind of ground level interventions that can kind of support things that the developers have to necessarily come up with first. That depending on exactly where it is, I haven't really looked at the site yet, but there may be opportunities there to sort of plug into sort of other nearby developments, and asking for those things early. They not only help with considerations with regard to security, if you think about them up front, that if you want to prioritize security, there are very real considerations that the design team can make early on that will put you in a better position later if it's considered upfront as something that really matters in an area. So I would really suggest that those committees who are involved take that principles of community design to heart, because you can do a lot it's not going to come up on its own, but if you start asking, not because you need to know how to do it, but if you just engage and ask questions about problems down the line and how they might be
managed through smart design choices. I think there's a lot of appreciation for community input early that can be seen in the response of the physical plant complex.
Well, I think also, now that we're talking about it and how to activate these ground spaces and these developments, I think, we have an economic development and culture committee, and, they could definitely weigh in on these things. I feel like we never really talk about, like, land use is not really there to, it's not their purview as a committee, in my opinion, to be deciding what gets advocated for in these spaces. So, maybe it's another way to tie another committee in, send them to another committee. I do think Angel did just express that we don't want any kind of treatment, facility or whatever, because they can offer services. Those services don't necessarily have to occupy the ground space at the same time, right? So that's just something to consider. And all right, so Candy, then Beverly.
So, with Volunteers of America, you just need to, because they're big, that they also manage and run Randall's Island, the shops over there. Based on my experience as a former chair to housing in this committee, a couple of years ago, we did it twice, but the first time, this was back in 2001 or 2, I think it was, and there was 27 veterans. They did a petition signing, looking for assistance. They came to the community board, and back then it was David Gibbons was the chair, and they needed some support and help to figure out how they were homeless for a long time. And it's one of the things about someone who has been out on the street for so many years, psychologically, to get back into housing, paying rent, all this whole responsibility that we will do all the time on a normal, it's hard. What they were doing was evicting them without giving them an opportunity to work with them. Considering the fact that my chair of the organization that I work for, he was a former veteran, but he also had supported that project. I went over to him and I explained to him, do you understand what's going on there? Investigating before I went out there. When I did go out there, I realized I jumped into, actually they put me in a meeting thinking I was part of the board, into this meeting. And it worked out fine, because when he was saying nobody's complaining from the community, I was like, oh, I'm sorry, but I got this act. And I told him, they gave me a tour immediately. I brought up the subject because I honestly stopped the whole meeting. Nobody was gonna leave, because I wanted to make sure that they took care of those 27 people that were being evicted that just got that part, to get into that program there. He was saying, they charge you the rent according to what status you have. So if you're getting HACA money, there's a different rent. If you're getting VA money, it's a different rent. It's all different structures. So that's something that we need to look at and see how actually they're doing the rentals and how much is it who's monitoring the rentals, okay? There is also the track record on how they actually managing the buildings for the city, their contract. They had to recant, and they did say that they were going to speak and work with those 27 veterans that they were about to evict, because I said, we're here to help out. Our organization will help them set up a bank account, help them with, structuring their lives and getting them back into shape. They said that they have an on-site person doing that. So I said, well, if you do, then why would you be even trying to attempt to evict these individuals without giving them the opportunity to get back into their routine, back into life? Because, being out in the street for so long is a mental thing that you really have to now transition into responsibility. So with that being said, I'm just stating that we should just also check their track record and history and how they are actually with other developments and other buildings that they manage for the city and they have contracts with, And when we did do the tour, their rooms about the size of Angel's office.
So they still manage in Randall's Island, you're saying?
I'm not sure if they still have their contract with them there,
yeah.
but I know that they had that as well.
Okay, well, we'll start with this one, but if they are still doing it there, well, then that's in our community, so we can go there as well. But, you know, let's start with this one and see how that goes. But I hear you, because I know if it's happening there too, then we should go, you know, that is our, you know, there seems to be certain areas, yeah, that don't get as much attention, so we have to start, you know.
And they do need help, because the veterans, a lot of them, we were able to transit, some of those residents and put them and place them in Bonifacio, you know, to senior development.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Beverly?
In regards to this property, project, they're proposing to do 700 units. One of them is going to be, that's a lot. So two of them are going to be super apartments. As it is now, 174 units that they have now, they're going to add an additional 185 units more for studio apartments. So, and in total, there's going to be 359 studio apartments for that building. For the people that's under the AMI, that they're going to be, it's going to be from 0 to 70% of the AMI. And for those apartments, for the studios, it's only 61 units. They don't have any one bed. Yeah, they have one bedrooms, 143, and two bedrooms, 172. For the AMIs, not for the supportive housing. Right. And 24 for 3-bedroom units, for people that's gonna be using an AMI. This property is owned by the city. It's, VOA is, a operator for them. They don't own it. And I'm kind of worried that the city sometimes does that they let the people that operate these programs for a while, then they wind up giving them the buildings.
That's,
Under the program that this building is owned by, it's HDFC. So they also have, under the HDFC, the ability to do home ownership also as a portion of the, what the HDFC, the partnership that's already in here. So I'm wondering why HPD, because they were here, why are they not thinking about developing that part of their duties as that HDFC? Because as it is now, I'm an advocate for home ownership, and East Harlem is 92 to 95% rentals. We need to change that a little bit, you know. I think we should, but HPD they monitor to make sure that the program is run and affordability is there. Taking them out of that, like you said, take that away if somebody else is owning it.
that's a choice, I'm sorry. That's a choice. The HDFC, most buildings are done under the HDFC with the, the option of the sponsor owner, that after the 30 years or 15 years, depending if it's a tax credit or regular HPD building, that's a choice within the owners to say, okay, we gonna just do away and make them into home ownership. Or you can make an agreement and extend the subsidy with the city and the state so they can continue putting the subsidy in to make it affordable and still keep it at rental. This way the residents are just renters, but they're not gonna convert them into home ownership. You know, because you still need to have a board. That HDFC gives them a board, it also gives you an exemption for the property.
But doesn't most of the subsidies come once they put an AMI on it? Because I'm thinking that the city, under the city, the city doesn't have to do an AMI if they're doing the rehabilitation. I mean, if they're the owners of the property. I thought that the money that comes for subsidies is linked to AMI.
But it depends what fundings you're going for and who's actually funding you. That's why I said with the RFPs that come out, we just need to look at one sample. And then this way you would understand then where the funding source is, where you're getting every money, because you raise money from everywhere. So that you can make that building happen. So
HPD doesn't necessarily, in all cases, mandate what bands are going to be within the project. it's part of a proposal that HPD considers, and once it meets their criteria, they give a commitment to their funding portion of that.
No, because it also depends on how much money it's gonna cost to operate that building.
Part of,
That's
part
what
of
it
the
is.
overall.
Bottom line, unless you're gonna pay, I'm gonna let you pay $500 rent, just an example, so we can move on, but if, let's say, I can say, I will do preferential rent then, right? So if I do a preferential for her, that means I'm gonna charge you more, because somehow, like I was just explaining to you,
You know, the unit mix though, Candy.
no, but there's still, that's how it still happens. It all depends on the funding that's gonna make it feasible to operate that building. How many people can actually afford, by income bands to make that building? Remember, you gotta pay back mortgage, you got whoever you're getting those funding resources from.
There's a little bit of wiggle
It's
room
everybody, there's no wiggle room, no.
to sort of make the math work.
It
And
depends what monies you're going for that project.
But here's the thing, right? We should learn all this, but at the same time, this is, well, no, I don't mean us talking, we could talk forever. We don't need to overcomplicate it for ourselves either. We can see what we want and then tell them and have them tell us, like,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like, because we could sit here and
You
record,
want more
this is what
affordable
we want,
units.
now tell us why or why this can't happen, and then we start looking. You know what I mean? So right now, it's like, we see this, like, we have 174 studio units. Yes, I understand, keep them. You don't want to displace anyone who's there. Why do you need to do now 189 more? Let's start with that question.
But who's staying with that building if it belongs to the city? Who's gonna be the
Well, that's the
sponsor?
thing.
See,
It's
that's
trailer.
my
We
question.
don't know. And they come with these presentations that are lacking a lot of information. So I think the time to follow up on that presentation would
Yeah,
be now,
definitely.
before they come with something more fine. Jessica, and then we are gonna move to, just going later than.
We gotta find out who's gonna stay with that key.
I want to call out something that you said about the aesthetics of feeling comfortable in a place after you've been living in a different set of conditions. There's environmental design is a part of that consideration, making sure that there's an awareness that you can change aesthetic things to ensure that more people can feel comfortable. I have a couple of colleagues who have done work in LA, actually Skid Row, similar buildings with intense populations, with this very issue of aesthetically, how do you make this an easier transition and still have it be a wonderful place for everybody? And there are types of things to consider that if the community starts to put that on the table upfront early, a smart design team will know what you're talking about and be able to kind of put that into considerations from, and it happens in the lobby, it happens when you walk in the door, it happens through the hallways, it happens in that shared space, it happens in the unit as well.
In the
But
space.
so I'm happy to kind of put together a few points of reference and kind of a short paragraph and kind of put it forward so that you have it as that conversation continues to evolve.
Thank you. All right. The reason I'm letting this go on long is presentations and discussions. It was going to be longer and I'll explain why when we get there. So D, we don't need to have a real, this is more of an announcement. Jose, and I shared the article with all of you, but Jose shared this article with me about tenants that were in 5 East Harlem properties that won up. I think it was over $1 million. I think this might be a typo, $500,000 in back rent and repairs in a settlement with their landlord, Emerald Equities, or housing conditions. So that was in this community. The reason that I bring it up is one of the things we were looking into was also private management companies within our community, and identifying, let's call them slumlords, right? This seems to have been one of them. I mean, we have some real bad. My sister lived on 106 between First and Second. I believe her landlord ended up in prison over what was going on. I know she lived there without gas for the whole year she lived there. And people aren't always so aware of what to do. She wasn't even either. First, like, oh, don't pay your rent. I was like, no, open an escrow, put your rent in there. That way, when you go to court, they'll be like, oh, you weren't withholding rent. And they worked out, these people went on a rent strike. So I read the article. They went on a rent strike, it was organized. People were afraid to do it from what I read, and understandably so. They don't know if it's gonna work, and then if it doesn't, they're gonna get thrown out, right? It worked. I think the landlord got foreclosed on. The article doesn't say everything. I'm hoping that he got foreclosed on because they weren't paying the rent and then they didn't have the money to, pay their mortgage or whatever. The reason I bring it up is I don't know what the likelihood of, locating some of these tenants and seeing if I think some of them seem willing to be interviewed for an article and stuff, obviously if they were comfortable. Be useful to understand exactly what they did and how they did it. It would be a good thing to know, so we could, be very careful with the word advise, because you don't want to advise people legally and then they do something and
The
you're held
liability.
accountable if it doesn't go right.
It was a large building.
It was 5 buildings, I believe. So it's just to put on your radars, because, there are things that, and groups can organize together clearly that they can accomplish. You might know more about this stuff than I do.
It was a legal aid, legal services.
It was.
I just sent you the link to
Okay.
legal services and
Okay.
the article.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if the community board is interested in speaking to some of the tenants, I can
Yeah.
reach out to the tenants who work on the case.
That'd be great.
But also, like, if tenants are coming to the community board, you can refer them to legal services for representation.
Yeah, but and that's, I think, that's very useful to be like, look, this is what happened, so because I don't think we should be, giving any advice, but thank you.
And to your point, I think the building is in foreclosure, and they want to explore different opportunities of like homeownership, maybe things
Yeah,
like the
city
CLT
and
and
the
other
COPA,
things, and some
that's
maybe
coming.
there is a relationship that they can build with the community board for support down the road. So
Great,
it would be good to reach out.
thank you. All right, so that's it for, well, that was more of a
Can
conversation.
I just
Yeah.
regarding announcements, I meant to tell you, Gail Board, just they passed a INT, what do INT stands for? It's a number. Intro, intro to look at Ward's Island for housing.
That's been around for over almost a year now,
Well,
that they've been talking about
I think they just passed the
They passed it,
intro.
because I know that they passed so
And-
many bills, I wanna see.
Right, to
Like you
at
got-
it.
least
Explore the,
explore the idea of it,
affordable housing.
of affordable houses on that. And the other thing was.
And wait, can I just interrupt you?
Yeah.
It's amazing, no one has talked, as far as I know, we have not been made aware by anybody.
No, when I seen that, I'm like, wait.
They wanna put a task force
Right.
together, a task force,
Right.
right? And it's our community, and we haven't
Right.
been notified.
Right, when I seen that, I'm like, wait a minute, that's community board 11,
Yep.
why are we not part of that, that's what I want.
So we gotta take our chair to the table, that's what it
Yeah.
is.
No, 100%, and I brought this up, I, in a conversation with somebody on the board, and I was like, why haven't they come yet? Oh, well, this, that, and, we all know Gail, but
Yeah,
I believe she introduced it, but we know this is not her district. I mean, I thank her for looking into it and everything,
right,
I just do
You should have
think
worked with
that
Diana.
well, I think Diana is the co-sponsor of it. Don't hold me to that, I believe she is. Again, though, and I'm not putting blame on anybody, I'm just saying that when something this big is being considered for our community, we should know, because I know the articles on this idea go back to, I think, almost the beginning of 2025. I think I read articles about this in March of 2025. I just didn't bring it here yet because I wasn't sure if I was misreading it or whatever, or maybe it was not even really gonna happen again, so thank you. Because I think that we have to, I just wonder, we do this a lot, I just wonder in another community, would it have taken a year for our board, and we still haven't been notified.
right,
Let's remember that.
exactly.
We still haven't been notified,
Right,
right? So we're being made aware internally, which is, so I will be raising that issue for sure.
Just to, for posterity, there was a former board member who was sort of, I don't know if they trailblazed that whole conversation more than Eva Chan. Does that ring a bell?
I mean, she rings a bell, yeah.
She's not here anymore, but I remember the conversations, early conversations, starting about that. So it's great to see as a potential point of traction for housing, but if there's a whole slew of issues relative to
Well, infrastructure, and,
proposal.
yeah, transportation, I mean,
Right.
it's there's a lot more than, oh, like, let's just build, you gotta
Right.
put utilities, I mean,
Right.
this is, the feasibility is, well,
Plus the buildings that's already there.
right,
You
yeah.
know, they got the.
Right, right, what are they gonna do with all of that?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And just something that I've noticed, I live on the other side of the 102nd Street footbridge, which is the only other way, if you're not on the 35 bus, you walk across the footbridge. And I think when the park was there, it was a real recognition of how vital that point of connection was for foot traffic and for people accessing everything that Woods Grant Asylum has to offer, whatever its iteration was. And I think relative to the large supported housing development that's happening at 1760 Third Avenue, between 97th and 98th Street, that was also part of the asylum seekers temporary housing before it became the project that it is now, which changed abruptly with the administrative change at the beginning of this year, like overnight, and families disappeared. So I think, you know, the recognition that we have resources that can be made available and that can be developed in ways that can support our communities, both of those which are stones throw walking distance from each other, and clustered around Metropolitan Hospital, which was drawn on, you know, so immensely by those populations when they were supported there, recognizing that piece of infrastructure as a public hospital is the cornerstone of that little pocket of the neighborhood was really profound, and to have it change overnight and now to have it be changing again. I think it warrants kind of looking at what the public infrastructure in that end of the island and point of pedestrian connection is as this goes forward.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. All right, so we're gonna go to old business. Show of hands, because then we'll see how quickly we do this tonight. How many people have reviewed the leak flood draft regulations?
I started to read this for a while back. I just need to read.
All right, so we're not gonna take too much time. I think okay, you know what, Jesse, you brought this actually to my attention, so
A
you
couple
go
months
first.
ago, this came out.
It did, and I haven't done my homework, but I do just want to, I want to call out as another reason why it's perhaps a good idea to consider, again, perusing the Permian Center data for earlier, 5,466 units in 2024 received HUD project-based rental assistance. And additionally, just another 5,201 units that were Milani units in East Harlem. And so that's not a small number of people who may be affected. So that's why, do we know what it means? Will the laws actually change? Maybe they have already. It may affect a large number of residents. I mean, it doesn't sound like it's not a small number. It's not hundreds, it's thousands, and it's over 5,000, which is close to 10,000, and nobody is a lot. So I don't know how to better understand the changes, and if there's anything we can necessarily do. But I think this may not be the right battle to fight.
It might not be. I mean, you almost wonder sometimes, like, is it even good to raise, to raise more attention to it if it's kind of like, but three things that are it's mostly, it's basically targeted towards, undocumented people who are living so one of them is eliminating a family member's right to contend eligibility, meaning that every family member in a household under age 62 would need to be of eligible immigration status for the family to receive housing assistance. The other one would be eliminating prorated assistance for mixed status families, and then requiring all HUD assistant tenants, regardless of age, to verify their eligible immigration status. And these are just 3 of them. We can think about it. I mean, we do have a congressperson. So, we never write, like a letter, really. I mean, we do, I guess, but I don't know. We do have a congressperson. This is federal.
That's right.
So we could tell this congressperson, hey, what are you doing? Are you aware of this? How much of an impact? Like, you should have these answers. How many people, are you aware of these regulations? How big an impact would this have? I know he has Washington, specifically, we want to know about East Palm, not that we're not concerned elsewhere. And then 3, what are you doing? And 4, what could we be doing too, right? So maybe as opposed to anything, it could be a starting conversation with reaching out to our congressperson. So, like most things, I had a different idea of having to sit here and talk. I think that might be the best approach, unless somebody has another idea. Candy, and then we'll move to 7, so we get everybody, number 7, so we get everybody out of here fast.
So as it is right now, well, at least until, this administration, but any child that, like, right now, that I'm aware of, their families that their parents are still immigrants, don't have their paperwork to say, but their children were born here. And because they were born here, they are living in NYCHA. They're giving them subsidies and stuff for the sake of those children, not for the parents.
Right.
So when I was starting to read this regulation, that was like early onset, when of course, they started talking about it. I was more concerned because we do have, a 202, and that's federal, and that anything that has to do with federal money with HUD, that affects us. The shutdown, everything would affect us. And reading that, I was just wondering how is that gonna impact a lot of our residents in the community. That's gonna leave those children homeless if the parents, with this administration, would decide to just, deport the families or even evict them. But what happens to the children because they are eligible, because they have a U.S. citizen resident, household member there. So that really is, it's a big study. We really gotta look at and see. That's gonna impact our community. It really is. As quiet as it's being kept, and it's not really discussed because a lot of people are afraid to get deported. We're not gonna talk about that, but that is it. It's existing right now. And I know you probably get a soon of all of that as well.
Yeah, I think reaching out to the Congress member makes sense. And a lot of the proposed regulations, not just on housing, but in general, that is coming up from the federal government, there's going to be legal challenges, or there already are legal challenges. Oftentimes there's preliminary injunctions, which kind of freezes things until the court makes an ultimate decision on what's going to happen in the case. And so some of this, it needs to wind its way through the courts. But I think in the meantime, we can still make sure that our elected representatives are advocating on these issues and
put it in their radar.
Yeah, it's in the house.
and to not sacrifice, immigrants and vulnerable, marginalized communities that are the punching bag for the federal administration.
The kids are being affected by that.
Well, on that topic, not really, but kind of. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, in fear of retribution and just living in a certain kind of way, didn't Johnson houses just have a big drug bust? Right, so, and look, you could say more than I can, but we went on a walkthrough of Johnson, right? And there was no mention, and I say this because I wonder, the people are probably afraid to speak about this, but I mean, it was a big bust, right? Like 11, 12 crew terrorizing.
But
yeah, like, I mean,
what gets to me is that if you are, I am part of the resident association executive board, and when we have our meeting with management, the first thing I put on the, on the agenda is how many vacancies we have. Because we have monthly meetings with management, and gave it to them in advance, just so we know what, what's the makeup, because of course, all of that affects the finances, the cash flow of every housing has based on the vacancies and based on the occupancies. And so, asking them that, we did not receive not one answer. Maybe I think 12, that's what they were, the maybe. I don't want a maybe. I want an accurate number to actually know how many we have empty. I understand that we do have to have a certain amount of empty apartments for the hospitalities in cases of emergency. Someone's apartment has been identified with lead, or they have to do remediation, but,
You're talking about vacant units?
yeah.
I'm talking about,
But what I'm saying
okay.
is that they gave, in the news, it said that there were some vacant apartments. We didn't know about that. That were warehousing it to use it for the drug bust.
okay, that's what I
So
thought you were
I
talking
think
about. Gotcha.
it's management's responsibility to have been transparent
Yes.
to tell us,
Right.
but someone that has to be responsible, you really gotta bring it down to management. Who gave you keys to get access to those apartments?
Right.
And when we've been complaining, because we have a grievance committee, about, repairs and all that kind of stuff, things were being, broken into, like, let's say the janitor's, closet, and literally we're looking at it in the closet, in the camera, we tell management that someone has access to those keys. Who is giving out those keys? So you know what? Now let's go down to where the responsibility is. Because then it makes it seem as though that housing development, and I'm not just talking about Johnson, because it's a lot of other NYCHA developments that I'm sure if they start doing a crackdown, they're gonna go through the same thing, right? But it comes down to management.
Well, I think, we could use, I think you just, and then we'll move to the next one. I just wanna say this.
No,
You
but
make a
we gotta
great
hold them
point
accountable.
about the vacancies. It'd be very hard to run a drug operation like this without having facility, right? So if they were aware of their vacancies or there weren't vacancies or whatever, you know what I mean? Then it'd be very hard to run this type of operation. But when there are vacant apartments that you could essentially create, whatever, store your drugs, set your operations up. So, it's the same argument, right? Where, we have to be sometimes like, oh, that business is gonna stay open too late, the lights are bright. I'm like, yeah, but you'd rather sometimes have that than dark streets.
Yeah, really, like
Right,
Park Avenue.
so vacancy, we could possibly use these types of things to push for, like, not keeping them vacant and being on top of it. So I'll move on, because that wasn't even a part of it, but I just thought about that.
yeah.
Because I remember reading it. So 7, Jason Wu had brought this to my attention about the Community Opportunity to Purchase Act. It's already been passed by the city council.
Yeah.
I put it on here because it hadn't been, and we're sure it had, I think, gone through, I'm not even exactly sure in its final form what exactly, I know there was back and forths. Essentially it's to, give like nonprofits and land trusts a first right of refusal to purchase, properties that will be sold, in a private sale. The idea is that, like giving this opportunity, and they would be paying essentially whatever the seller was asking. They would be given, I believe, a little bit more time to close, or, because there are, private sales can happen like that if someone's like all cash. So that's been that was one of the pushbacks, I guess, was, oh, they can't sell it as fast, or, somebody could own one small little building and now you're kind of telling them that they can't close quickly, whatever. That was what I heard the argument against it was. Go ahead, you take the floor.
So eligible nonprofits get 45 days to express interest, 90 to make an offer, and 30 to finalize the contract. Landlords can still accept private offers if a nonprofit fails to match it within 15 days.
Well,
So
then that really solves the
But
problem.
that's
right?
tricky. What else information you have with that? Because I based on certain experiences that have been done.
I don't think it's for every property,
It's not
either,
all.
right? There's
So
certain
isn't
properties.
that
we
with
don't-
is it with for profit? Or did I misread what it was saying?
about that.
I thought it was just.
Eligible nonprofits.
No,
So there's
nonprofits with
there's
for-profits,
criteria.
it doesn't have anything to do with joint ventures with the for-profits, doing with the not-for-profit and the first right of refusal, because if it's like that, there's a lot of, trickiness going on with that right now as it is. From nonprofits with the first right of refusal, when they were doing, back in the eighties. Right now, we're a little bit more savvy than in the eighties, where, when Koch did that whole pilot to have nonprofits merge and do joint ventures with, for-profit, and then the for-profit comes out keeping the building, they sell it without giving the first right of refusal to the non-for-profit.
Well,
And we're
so,
still, right, and then the developer's fee and everything, you don't see it, you know?
so there,
Still fighting something.
this is according to Google Gemini, so I don't know how reliable this is. It says that there is the ability to do that joint venture here. It says, according to this, a for-profit company can only participate if it forms with a certified nonprofit. And then that joint venture must be vetted and certified by HPD to ensure that the partnership aligns with the long-term affordability goals. And then for-profit partners must typically demonstrate a record of maintaining affordability restrictions and have the financial capacity to handle the acquisition and rehabilitation of the property. Now, I don't know if that's an
That'll hold them to be the guarantors to make sure that they don't, in the case of a moment, something gets default, they default, they're gonna go after their private.
Well, I guess, here's the thing though, and I could be wrong, even if that is the case, right? So, right now, they could just sell it to anybody, right? So at least with this, it still presents affordability, even if it's for 30 years, it's still better, like, than somebody continuing to buy in our community and just leaving it empty and waiting for somebody to accumulate a bunch of buildings, right? There would
Get
be,
vacancy,
and then think about it, if a nonprofit, at least my opinion, if a nonprofit is going to put its name and reputation out there, they're not going to do that and then the for-profit person will be like, all right, we're warehousing this now, we're just gonna sit on it. So, I think, I hear you, but it might also be,
No, it's
it
gonna
might
hold-
be necessary to
No,
some
no,
point.
what they'll probably be, because what they'll probably do with the for-profit, have them to be like a guarantor with their personal properties, that in the
Oh, like
event that
as
you
collateral.
default, that's right, in case you default, well, we're coming after your collateral. And of course, that's why you're gonna stay on top of it, to make sure you're gonna keep it affordable. You're not gonna want no one to come and take
That'd be a good
your
thing.
personal thing,
Yeah, that's a
the
good
state
thing.
does that, the state.
Well, I mean, anyone who's taking out, if they need a mortgage or whatever, it's always gonna have to be secured by collateral, right? They're not gonna get the money. If they're gonna buy this in a private sale, I'm assuming the money's not coming from the city to purchase the property. Now, whatever may happen after that could be different,
That's the.
right?
that's
So
the-
that, but like a lot of it could be, some of it could just be leaving the property the way it is, right? There could be a landlord who's selling and it's gonna displace everybody, and they might just come in and buy it
And
and be
save
like,
the people. to
it
save-
could be a rent stabilized property, which are hard to get out of, but theoretically, if you buy adjacent ones, you could, redevelop and get, so there are a host of ways, in my opinion, that this could be utilized beneficially, and I don't personally see the negative to it that would nearly outweigh what positive could come from it.
The thing is,
Yeah,
Just give
Jason.
some quick context. So, the city council members in this district supported the bill, and it passed city council, but the mayor has not signed it.
Right.
Right.
So now, we can kind of guess what's gonna happen. But Mayor Adams can veto, sign, or he can ignore it. If left unsigned for 30 days, it automatically becomes law. I think it's unlikely he's going to let that happen. It's likely he will veto it. And then outgoing speaker Adrian Adams has said that she would not call city council back to override a veto. And so if that happens, this is gonna be pushed into the next city council.
right, because they could reintroduce it again. That would be better than if anything happens. It's just the outreach, like, let's say we have nonprofits, right? How are they going to actually make this work
to the benefit of the non-for-profit groups, okay? To know that these buildings, these sites are gonna be put up for these programs. Because let me just tell you, it's who you know these days, okay?
Well, I think they have to, I believe there is
And
a
I'm not saying I'm being like
notification
a soldier,
process.
but we're talking reality.
No, I think there is a notification process. I think the
But on
sale,
what site, like, would they tell, all right, like, for instance, would they let Community Board 11, like, if this is gonna be passed on to law, right, let's say, in a perfect world, that, Adams will say, okay, I'm signing it, I'm
There's
going,
gonna,
right?
there's gonna need to be regulations.
Right.
Yes,
for,
but
what the
more,
process
but
is.
what-
Like, not every, like, you're raising a lot of like the details of like what's gonna actually.
How would,
look
but
like
how
in
we're
any
gonna
way.
actually implement, be part of this? So what I'm trying to say is, are they going to actually have Community Board 11 as part of, or any community board in that community area to let them know that this is happening and the
Also-
opportunities are available for the
so they have
community.
to file, as far as
Community outreach
as
for
far
that.
as I'm aware, when they have to file a notice of intent to sell, it would probably be filed with HPD, meaning that the landlord would be letting the city know they plan to sell. As far as then, I would assume
Outreach.
the city would have probably some mechanism in which they make everyone aware. Now, granted, I mean, yes, some organizations are gonna be more alert than others.
Yeah.
But that's how it is with everything. You know, they're not gonna be able to go and, tell everybody, but, if we do our job too, people will know. It'll probably be in a centralized database where it'll be like, here are the properties for sale, the contact, and here's your opportunity. I mean, well, as Jason said, like, I agree, but that is the nuance. The idea is though, is the spirit of this better than what we have right now? And I think the answer is definitely yes. So, how it all gets worked out, for sure, but all you need to do is go up and down Third Avenue in our neighborhood, and that's how you know that this is at least worth a try. All right, Jessica, Beverly, and then we're going to go to new business.
So I don't know very much about it, but I do know a little bit that after a law passes, there's a period by which the rulemaking happens, right? And that's where the details get hammered out. And so if there are constructive suggestions, I think who we put those forward to, whether it's kind of agency partners or there's still open ears because somebody's got to figure it out. And if there are concerns and suggestions that are not kind of opposition to the bill, that say, okay, we get this, it's happening, it's not bad, but we want to make sure that it covers X, Y, and Z. The door's not closed. That for a community board to put that out there, to let the council member know, to have them be part of the record. If HPD is the agency, to make sure it kind of gets in that pipeline. I think the rulemaking process is like, it's a bunch of people sitting around a table having a conversation, and you put a bug in someone's ear, then they will bring that to the table if it makes sense. So, any
I just want to make sure that they, let the community boards be part of the partnership in the process to at least add information, point of information for anybody, pass the word around. As well, to make it equal opportunity. This is not bad.
Okay, Beverly?
I agree with Candy regarding the details of that and letting the community boards know. Because from what I'm understanding, HPD would have a specific list of qualified nonprofit organizations.
There's eligibility criteria.
Right, so there's eligibility criteria. I think that for our community, we should tell all the community nonprofit organizations, now get on that list ASAP, because if this goes past. The other thing is that there's also a TOPA for the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act also that has been on the
City level.
right, that's state level. And then when we was talking about the types of buildings for the COPA, It's usually properties that's distressed, I guess, talking about how many violations and stuff like that. It's like you said, it wasn't all types of buildings.
It's not necessarily distressed buildings for COPA.
Oh, what about for, expiring of, affordability and building units 4 and more? Those are the type of buildings that the COPA would, which is city, would, take over, be a part of.
Oh, yeah, you're right. It's 4+ units, significant Class B code violations,
Right.
over $1,500 in debt per unit, or expiring within 2 years. Yeah.
And then the other issue with that, that I know that people's opposed to it, is that if I'm a property owner and I have children, I can't sell to my children first.
Well, yeah.
So that's, I mean, as
You wouldn't have to necessarily sell to your children, and then you said it's over 4 units?
yeah,
So it's not, one of the things with smaller landlords or 2-family homes, so they clearly took that out to not impact that. And I'm pretty sure there are ways to make a sale or transfer to your child where they would not have to register.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think
But we
that,
can look into that,
yeah,
because I
that's
agree.
something.
Yeah, but I think, I guess it's happened, but like, if you own property, I don't actually think you selling it to your children. It's probably tied up in a corporation that they'll just, you know what I mean? You're not gonna sell a major asset to an individual. It would be a transfer, or they would just be an officer of the company. But we can look into all that. I think, again, first of all, we don't have to take a position as a
Right,
committee, it's been
right.
passed. But nothing is gonna be perfect. But I think this is a step in the right direction, and I think, well, there's smarter people than me, that'll figure out all the nuances, and we can keep our eye on that. So I think we can support this as it is, right? And then watch as the details come in, and then, we can maybe have a voice then as well, right? So again, this is an evolving thing. And hopefully it does go through and doesn't have to backpedal and go again, all right? So, with that said, we'll move to new business. There is none, so,
Can I just flag, people probably heard in the news that Mayor Adams appointed 4 new members to the Rent Guidelines Board, and so assuming that the people he appoints are going to be pro rent increases, then that'll make it harder next year to see a rent freeze for regulated apartments. And so that's just something for people to keep in mind. It's one of the kind of big housing issues that affects 1 million tenants in New York, and it's something that a lot of the housing organizations are
nice.
next year.
In regards to the people that appoint, how long do they stay on the?
Well, I think it's a 2-year term,
Oh,
and so
okay.
there's questions around whether the new mayor-elect would be able to remove them,
Okay.
if it's for cause, or what that looks like, and it creates legal issues and complications.
Right.
So we'll see what happens next year. But this is gonna be the big fight in the spring.
For the next 6 months. We're fighting a lot with all these issues that's coming up right now.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So, new business, there's none, so Khalid, could you take the roll?
You got it. Then Brihal,
Present.
Marie Charles. She is online.
Present, I'm here. Sorry.
David Giordano is also online. Thank you, David. James Gray.
Here.
John Green.
Here.
Thank you, John. Christina Johnson.
Sorry, I'm here. I'm here.
You got it. Thank you. James Kemp.
Present.
James.
Can you hear me?
Moore.
Oh.
James, you got you. Thank you, Jessica. I got you. Beverly Pavone.
Present.
Don Sanders is absent.
Did you get Marie Charles?
Yes, Maria. We got you.
Okay, thank you.
Loretta So.
Present.
Thank you. Kenny Vives Vasquez.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jason Wu.
Present.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
All right, meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Diana is on the
Everybody.
For,
The,
for COPA,
Good night.
Good,
well,
good.
first
night,
of
everybody.
all,
Good night. Take care.
anyone who does affordable housing
Good
is
night.
following
Night, Lord.
legislation.
Good night.
And I think there's specific developers